It's finally happened. Red Dead Redemption 2 is now out on PC. If you want to know our opinions on the game, you can still go check out our full review from last year. That hasn't changed. But I got Michael Hyam here, who has had a chance to check out the PC version, and that is what we're going to talk about today, is how the PC version stacks up. Michael, what do you think?
The PC version, if you can get it to run, it's a great version of the game. There are several things that may attract you to the PC version. The first thing I want to talk about is graphics options. Now, whenever there's a proper PC port of any big console game or game that was exclusive to consoles, graphics options are always a big deal. Like GTA 5, Red Dead Redemption 2 has so many options in the menu. You don't have to worry about all of them, but if you're into tinkering your settings, of course there's native 4K support, there's 1440p, even ultra-wide support. I play in 21:9, and it's nice to play Red Dead Redemption 2 with the vastness of the open world in ultra-widescreen, and it looks great in that regard. Of course, you can change all of the quality settings as well, texture, shadows, lighting, all that good stuff. Draw distances have been improved, and there's also things like tessellation, global illumination. So the whole roster of graphics options are there. And if you look at the PC requirements and recommended specs, they're not too high, but if you want to have all these bells and whistles, I would recommend that you have a very high-end PC. I'm working with an Intel Core i7-7700K and an NVIDIA RTX 2080, and I'm playing in 1080p ultra-wide, which is a little bit more than standard 1080p in terms of pixel density, and I have everything cranked up to either ultra or high, and I'm getting decent frame rates. About 60 to 80.
Okay.
Anything beyond that, like if you try and do native 4K on PC, you're going to need maybe a 2080 Ti. And of course, you want to bump up some of those quality settings as well. So it is, if you want all that stuff, you're going to need to have a fairly high-end PC.
Yeah, I actually did a couple of tests with one of our office PCs, which has a 2080 Ti, and I also tried to max out everything. I turned everything as high as I could possibly turn it, and I was getting... like max 80, minimum was like 40, and you could definitely see it fluctuating at points as I was playing, but it is, is it a demanding game if you want to try and turn on everything.
Speaking of the game being demanding, I think one of the most important aspects of this being a PC version is frame rate. Now, the console versions were locked at about 30 frames per second, which is fine. It works well for this style of game because this is not a competitive FPS where frame rate is going to be an inherent advantage. But it is nice to play this game at a smooth 60 or higher frame rate. I have a 144 hertz monitor, and boy, things look a lot smoother. So I think that's an aspect that a lot of PC gamers are going to want to get out of this. Now, the PC version looks incredible. So does the Xbox One X and PS4 Pro versions. I would say the PC version, if you have that high-end PC, it can look better than those console versions. But they all are visually stunning, regardless. So here the leg up is having that added frame rate. And, it helps in combat. We were talking about how maybe it's a little bit easier to aim now that you have a smoother frame rate. You're not fighting the game itself in terms of trying to get headshots or moving around the environment a little bit more, especially when the action gets hot and there's a lot going on. It's a little bit easier to just kind of take in the moment when you're in the middle of a huge firefight when you have higher frame rates. So that's a cool advantage to have that's inherent to a PC version. There are some visual bugs though. I noticed that trees sometimes just get like glitchy and start fizzing out in the out in the environment. Didn't happen that often. It wasn't game breaking or anything, but it was kind of noticeable when I'm just chilling in the camp and I just see trees freaking out and stuff.
Yeah, I think it's because it looks so good most of the time that small stuff like that really isn't a big deal.
Right.
It's a little more noticeable in a game like this.
I don't know if this is specific to the PC version, but I did notice that when I go into first-person view and I'm talking to some of the NPCs, sometimes their mouths don't move when they're saying something. That's a little weird, but again, it is a rare occasion, and when it does happen, it's noticeable. But other than that, there isn't much in terms of visual bugs.
One thing I did notice that I'm not sure how prevalent it is, but I noticed that there were some animations that were actually a little lower frame rate. Like I think the strap on Arthur's gun was actually like the animation on it seemed a little bit lower than 60 frames a second, which is something that you never notice on console. that's a little bit noticeable on PC when you're running at higher frames. For the most part, though, like that, I just noticed it with that one example. I don't know how prevalent that is, but that's a minor thing that's worth mentioning.
Okay. One thing to note about the graphics options, though, is that there are multiple options for anti-aliasing, which is an important setting to use. Note that MSAA is the most demanding, so if you're going to crank that to either 4 times or 8 times to get the full effect, you're going to take a big cut in frame rate. So what I've been doing is using temporal anti-aliasing and then cranking up the temporal sharpness to kind of get rid of that softer look that it may give if you don't crank up the sharpness. Now, the reason why the PC version and all its graphics options are important is because a lot of Red Dead Redemption 2 has to do with your relationship to the world. When you're horseback riding from one town to another, you're soaking in the vastness of the open world and just how pretty it looks, how the sunset looks, how the sun blasts through the trees when you're hunting and stuff like that. And a lot of it has to do with the cinematic quality of its cutscenes. And I think that when you're playing on a PS4 Pro or Xbox One X version, those qualities shine through, and it does as well on PC. So there's no huge advantage in terms of, is this a different experience on PC when it comes to visuals? Like, well, if you played on the upgraded consoles, other than frame rate, I think that you are getting mostly the same type of experience.
Well, then one of the things that is potentially different on PC is mouse and keyboard support. How did that feel?
Keyboard and mouse controls are important to me, even for games that aren't competitive FPSs. And I think they've translated well to Red Dead 2. Some of the menu stuff is weird because when you pull up a menu and you want to look at different items, my instinct is to hover over the items with the mouse cursor to kind of highlight it and see like its details and stuff. The problem is that the game doesn't recognize you hovering over them as, switching to, I want to look at what this item is. And instead you would have to use the arrow keys to kind of shuffle through your menu. But not WASD. So that's kind of your only option by default. And I think that's a little weird because I would rather have it if I hover my mouse over it. It's like, okay, you're going to highlight a different item. And so what I would do is click it and like that would be to use it. So that kind of threw me off a little bit. But these are minor things in the grand scheme. And, just being able to navigate the environment and use your mouse for aiming is a really cool feature to have, of course. And with Red Dead 2, there's so many different systems and mechanics at play. You're pulling out your satchel, you're going to your horse, looking into your inventory there, picking up things, looting stuff. And there's just so many different controls that it's nice to have that on a keyboard instead of maybe fumbling through the controller for the first couple of hours. Now, when it comes to controller support, though, that control scheme has translated one for one from the consoles. So if you'd rather play with a controller, that control scheme is fine. Just takes some getting used to. And you just plug in a DualShock 4 or an Xbox One controller or even Xbox 360 controller, and you're good to go straight off the bat.
Well, I think one thing that's worth addressing, even though it might be resolved by the time this video is out, is the launch day crashes that the game was having. It seemed like it was having a bit of a rough launch. Did you have any of that in your experience?
I did. I would crash to the desktop when I would try to load the story missions. And I had one where it was in the loading screen and it said the game exited unexpectedly. Then another one where I was at least a minute into the intro cutscene and then it would crash there.
Oof.
There were some workarounds that I was able to figure out, such as making sure that I was using DirectX 12, which is a menu option. Also, updating your drivers, your video drivers. If you're using AMD or NVIDIA, you want to make sure that you're using the most up-to-date drivers, of course. And a combination of those things got me to run the game smoothly. Later on launch day, there was a patch that rolled out, and it seems to have fixed most things for most players, by all accounts. So aside from a fairly rough launch day, I think that, this game is up and running quite well if you have the proper PC. Rockstar did add some content to the PC version, mostly side stuff that is largely inconsequential to the main story, but they are there. They have extra bounty missions, gang hideouts, treasure maps. There's a new stranger, if you're looking out for that, some trinkets, some weapons, horses. But this is all complementary stuff that, it's not going to affect the overall experience. And but those things are there. There's also photo mode. So if you like taking pictures, you can get Arthur looking all nice and stuff, and or as dirty as you want, really, because that fool can get real dirty, and take some nice photos. You have some options like contrast, filters, changing the camera angles.
I like the filters because they have the couple that make it look like the photos in the loading screen and stuff. I'm like, oh, that's kind of nice.
Yeah,
like
and Red Dead Redemption 2 has such wonderfully detailed environments that that game is prime for a photo mode. That about covers everything I want to talk about in terms of the Red Dead Redemption 2 PC version. So if you haven't played this game, it's an absolutely wonderful game. We gave it our Game of the Year for 2018, so it has our stamp of approval. And if you want to play this on PC, if you've been holding out, this is definitely a version that you can play that's runs properly. At least now it does.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Michael. And for any other Red Dead related coverage or just any coverage about any video game, really, stay tuned to GameSpot.